As a child, I hated lollipops. Just the possibility that my hands would get sticky was a risk that I could never make myself take. I could never get over the feeling that no matter how many times I washed my hands, they would always feel sticky and dirty to me. When I was younger, the side of my anxiety would come out, small, odd quirks. It seemed to escalate as I got older and school became more of a main part of my life. I like to say that I naturally am about average intelligence, yet force myself to get higher than average grades due to my inability to accept anything else. I remember even as a young child not being able to sleep the night before I'd be able to get a grade back, too wrapped up in the what-ifs of it all. It was as if I could not separate the worthiness as a human from the grades on a piece of paper. As odd and intense as all this may sound, I was able to keep it all relatively under control until my senior year of high school. Senior year is the time that most of my classmates were cementing their plans, yet it was a time of my life where everything was thrown up in the air. I began to get incredibly sick. My lungs kept closing, and no matter what medication the doctors pumped me with, it seemed as though nothing would help. Growing up, I had bad asthma and would get sick a lot, but I always assumed I was just unlucky. After spending hours and hours getting blood taken and tests done, my doctors decided that there must have always been something wrong with me, and the previous times I thought I was sick was due to improper diagnosis and treatment. Between added stress that my body was under, along with the normal stress of leaving high school, my anxiety began impacting almost every aspect of my life. When I started to have panic attacks, I felt consumed by anxiety. I felt overwhelmed shame, as if admitting I was struggling, I would also be admitting to be broken, so I shoved it down. When I got to SJU, I was not only thrust into a new social and educational environment, but also a new way of living and taking care of myself. So now someone who barely knows how to do laundry was tasked with staying on top of my numerous and time-consuming medications while dealing with the emotional challenge of coming to terms with what this would all mean in the long term of my life. In the beginning of my time at SJU, I was in complete denial about everything. I thought if I made sure I was never alone and always had to invite someone so I would never have to deal with the mounting anxiety and sadness over the state of my body. Obviously, this tactic could only last so long, and when it was over, I hardly recognized myself. I felt completely alone. The anxious energy and nausea I once felt had now turned into something that was so much more complicated. I began spontaneously sobbing, and that I could never just sit and be that there was something else that needed my attention. And that even if there wasn't, there was always a feeling that I did not deserve happiness, or at least a moment of peace. I realized that something had to give when I was so upset that I refused to leave the chapel, feeling that the building was the only place I could be safe, and that God was the only one who loved me. I started to face my problems. When I opened up to my mother about what was happening to me, I told her that I was weak for not being able to deal with the constant pounding of adrenaline in my veins. But that is when she dropped the bombshell. She told me that I shouldn't be feeling those things, and I was strong for acknowledging that I should not feel this way all the time. With her support, I started going to CAPS, and eventually, with the help of my doctors at home, I was put on Zoloft. It was a process trying to get everything to work together, but I remember vividly the day I finally realized a difference. I had woken up, and instead of my first thought being dread for the day that was going to come and anger at myself for needing sleep, I opened my eyes and smiled, laid in bed while I soaked in the feeling of the emptiness the motor that had been driving me had left. It was a long journey, but I cannot express how much I wish I had started earlier, rather than being ashamed. But I try not to dwell on that regret. It just took me a while to realize that asking for help means that you are acknowledging your potential to live the best version of your life.